Yo, what's up? This is Teo456 here, and today, welcome to day 21 of my 365-day challenge. Now, in this video, it is going to be it is probably going to be a longer video than the other ones. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about my favorite deck of Magic the Gathering, specifically in the Commander format. Me and my friends have been playing Commander for a couple of years. I want to keep this short, by the way. Me and my friends have been playing Commander for a couple of years now, and I can safely say that this is probably my favorite deck of the whole entire game, just because I've played it so much. I've gotten decent with it. I wouldn't say that I've gotten really good at it, but I've definitely won some pretty funny games with it, and I'll explain those games in a little bit. But let's start off with the actual commanders for my deck. So in Commander, normally you have one creature. It's specifically supposed to be a legendary creature, where your deck is sorely around from it. So there are 5 colors of Magic. There's white, blue, black, red, green, and then there are multicolored cards. So like you can have white, black, blue, green, yada yada yada. This deck is Temur, or blue, red, green. So this has 2 commanders. They both have partner, but they are partnered with each other. And another reason why I really like this deck so much is because of these. Now my webcam is a little bit grainy, so it's not going to really show up that well. But here we have Paco and Haldan. Now, whenever I first originally got into Magic, or actually got into Magic, it was back whenever the set Ikoria came out, and this was one of the recons. Recons are pre-constructed decks that you can buy for like $50, $40. It just depends on where you buy them from and all that jazz. And they come with, a pre-constructed deck and 2 face commanders, which this deck had 2 face commanders. And now, what do? So, let me flip them around real quick. And don't worry, these are double sleeved, so don't get too riled up about that. Okay, so the main thing for the deck is Paco. So what you do with Paco is whenever it attacks, it has haste, so you can swing with it as soon as it comes out. It is a 5-drop, red, green, and then 3. It has partner, and it has haste. Haste means you can attack as soon as it comes out into the battlefield. Normally, if they don't have haste, they have summoning sickness, which means you have to wait a turn to actually use them or swing with them. And then it says, whenever Paco Arcane Retriever attacks, exile top card of each player's library and put a fetch counter on each of them. And then you put a 1/1 counter on Paco for each card exiled this way. Or you put a counter on him for each non-creature card exiled this way. So that means lands, instants, enchantments, sorceries, battles, all that jazz. Anything but creatures. Now, the funny thing is, if there is an adventure on a creature, you can still use the adventure. And I'll get to that in a second. And then we have Haldan. Haldan lets you cast those spells, basically. It's a 1/4, 3-drop, blue, and 2. And then I can spend mana of any color to, cast those spells. So that's these. Those are the actual commanders of the deck. Hopefully I'm not doing too bad of a job explaining this, because Magic is a little confusing sometimes. And before we get into any of this, I'm going to start with the lands. So this deck has, and I am just now realizing this is a pretty low number, but you'll see why it's a low number. It has 28 lands. It has 6 basics, 2 of each color, so green, blue, red. And then there's 3 snow-covered lands, and then there are 3 regular lands. Snow-covered lands aren't really different. They're just, snow-covered, and there are some cards that deal with that, but I don't have any of those cards in my deck. Next up, we have a Triome. The only Triome that can go in the deck is 3 colors. And it is each of the land types, so forest, island, mountain. And there are other lands that, search for those. And I'll get to those in a second. And this is really good because it also has cycling 3. I don't really use the cycling portion of it. I normally just fetch this land and put it onto the battlefield as soon as I can. But it enters battlefield tapped, which isn't like too terrible considering that it gives you 3 colors. Next up we have Taiga. This is one of the more expensive cards in my deck, and the reason why is because it came out in a really old set and with a limited print run, which means they only printed a select few amount of these cards. Now, I only have one of the OG duels for this deck. The other 2, Volcanic Island and Tropical Island, I don't have because, well, they're expensive as hell. But I have that. This is the red-green one. The other 2 are the blue-green and blue-red one. And I'll get to the prices in a second because they're going to blow your mind. I'll do that near the end. Next up is the Shocklands. We got Breeding Pool, Steam Vents, and Stomping Ground. The reason why we call them Shocklands is because there's a card called Shock, which deals 2 damage to any target. But the reason why these are called Shocklands is because whenever it enters the battlefield, you may pay 2, and if you don't, it enters battlefield tapped. So you can pay 2 life, and it'll enter untapped. Next up is the Battle Bond lands. They are the same as Shocklands, except instead of paying 2 life, they enter battlefield untapped if you have 2 or more opponents. And then we get on to the fetch lands. The fetch lands are lands that you pay 1 life and you search your library for a land type of either one. So like this one is white or green. So I can pay 1 life to search my library for a forest or a plains card. Now, I know what you may be asking. How can you search your library for a plains card if your deck doesn't have any white in it? Well, you don't have to have white cards to use. Like you can use these in a tricolor deck because it searches for a forest and it doesn't have any land types or anything like that. I can I'm sure someone else can explain it better, but they were able to be used in the deck. And then I have the blue-black one, the black-red one, all that jazz. I have 9 of them because the 10th one is a black-white card, and my deck doesn't run either of those. So the fetch land has to have something to search for in your deck. And then now we have the rest of the lands that really don't have, any groupings together. They just have special attributes, like Yavimaya right here. It makes every land a forest, no matter what land it is. It could be a fetch land and it'll turn into a forest, which means it'll tap for green mana. And then we got Exotic Orchard. It says add 1 mana of any color that an opponent controls could produce. So if your opponent controls a Steam Vents, this land can tap for red or green. Then we got Gemstone Caverns. This is one of the more expensive cards in my deck. So this one's a little bit confusing, so just bear with me here. It says, if it is in your opening hand and you're not playing first, you may begin the game with it in play with a luck counter on it. If you do, remove a card from your hand from the game. So basically, if you don't go first and it's in your opening hand, you're going to put it on the battlefield with a luck counter on it, which basically means you can tap it for any color. But you have to exile a card as well underneath it. Or, no, you don't have to have it underneath it, but you just exile a card, which means it's gone forever. For the game, not completely gone. but it's just gone forever for the game. Unless if cards say otherwise, but there's not that many cards that do that. Then we got Command Tower, pretty simple, tests for 1 mana of any color. Then we got Reliquary Tower, it's just artifact land, colorless land, but it makes it to where I don't have a maximum hand size. And then we got Mana Confluence. Mana Confluence says I can tap 1 mana of any color, but I have to pay 1 life each time I tap it. Alright, now that all the lands are out of the way, we are going to move on to the enchantments. And later on, you're going to see more enchantment, like 1 or 2 more enchantments, but you'll see why later on. So first we got Simic Ascendancy. Now, I can win this in my deck, but I have to, make it to my next turn after I meet the specific conditions. So it is a 2-drop Simic, which is blue-green. Fighting land of Simic Ascendancy. You pay Simic and 1. Put a 1/1 counter on target creature you control. Then it says whenever 1 or more 1/1 counters are put on a creature you control, put that many growth counters on Simic Ascendancy. Then whenever there were 20 or more on it, on your next upkeep, you win the game. Pretty simple. Pretty simple. Then you got Underworld Breach. It is red and colorless. And it says each non-land card in your graveyard has escape. The escape cost is equal to the card's mana cost plus 3, plus exile 3 other cards from your graveyard. And it has flavor. It explains what escape is. It says you may cast cards from your graveyard for their escape cost. So let's say I have Utopia Sprawl in my graveyard. I can cast it for its escape cost if I exile 3 cards other than it and pay the green. And then at the beginning of my end step, I sacrifice this. This is a good combo piece with Brain Freeze, but I'm not going to get into that in this video. We got Utopia Sprawl and Chance of Forest. And then you add 1 mana of any color of the chosen color whenever you tap that forest. Cinder Vines. It is Gruul, which is red-green. It says whenever an opponent casts a non-creature spell, Cinder Vines deals 1 damage to that player. And then you may pay 1, sack it to destroy target artifact or enchantment, and then if you do, it deals 2 damage to that permanent's controller. Then we got Wilderness Reclamation. It is 3 and a green. I did not mean to make that rhyme. It says at the beginning of your end step, untap all lands you control. This is good for whenever you're holding up counter spells and want to interact with your opponents. Next up we got Rhystic Study. Rhystic Study is a really good enchantment because it says whenever an opponent plays a spell, you may draw a card unless that player pays 1. So if they don't pay 1, you just keep drawing cards. But it specifically says may, so you don't have to completely deck yourself out. The reason why that's good is because you always want to have cards to play against your opponents and on your next turn. Next up is Wild Growth. Same thing as Utopia Sprawl, except it's specifically a green mana. Then we got Carpeted Flowers, one of my personal favorites of this deck, but sometimes they get whiffed, so that's why it's not specifically in my favorites pile. So it's a green, and it says at the beginning of each of your main phases, if you haven't added mana with this ability this turn, you may add X mana of any one color, where X is the number of islands target opponents controls. So the reason why this is specific is because if your opponents aren't running any islands, then this card isn't good. It's just an empty slot in your deck. Next up, we have the artifacts. So most of the artifacts in my deck are mana artifacts. And then we'll just go over them pretty quickly. So Lotus Petal costs 0, and then it says sacrifice it, add 1 mana of any color to your mana. Pretty simple. Then we got Mana Crypt. It costs 0 mana, and it says it adds 2 colorless, and then at the beginning of your upkeep, I flip a coin. If I lose a flip, it deals 3 damage to me. It's a really good card. Soul Ring is like Mana Crypt, except it just has 2 colorless and it costs 1 mana. Arcane Signet costs 2 mana, add 1 mana of any color. Pretty much. Chromatic Lantern, really good mana rock. It costs 3, and it says lands you control have add 1 mana of any color, and then it adds 1 mana of any color itself. So that's really good. And then we got one of the more expensive artifacts in my deck, Jeweled Lotus. It costs 0, and then you sack it to add 3 mana of any one color. Spend this mana only to cast your commander. So it's a fast way to get your commander out. Next up, we have the Ozolith. It is a legendary artifact that costs 1. It says whenever a creature you control leaves the battlefield, if it had counters on it, put those counters on the Ozolith. So this is really good with Pako because it adds counters, and Pako is going to be a threat, so people are going to want to destroy it often. So it's really good because if there's like 12 counters on Pako, you just move into Ozolith, and then you move him back with the Ozolith's other ability, which says at the beginning of combat on your turn, if the Ozolith has counters on it, you may move all counters from the Ozolith on a target creature. So that's why it's really good. Then we got Sword of Hearth and Home. It's a pretty good sword. It costs 3. Equipped creature gets +2/+2, and it has protection from green and from white. It says whenever a creature deals combat damage to a player, exile up to 1 target creature you own. Then search your library for a basic land card. Put both cards on the battlefield under your control, then shuffle. So you flicker something, and you put a land from your hand or from your deck onto the battlefield. And it has Equip 2. Equip means you pay a mana cost and you attach it to the creature. Next up, we have the sorceries. 3 ramp spells, 3 visits. It's a 2-drop. Search your library for a force card. Put it onto the battlefield. Pretty good because it doesn't make it enter tapped. Farseek. Search your library for a plains, island, swamp, or mountain card and put it onto the battlefield tapped. Then shuffle your library. The reason why this is good is because it's not specifically a forest. It's just pretty much any land in my deck. Except for a forest, but I'm not going to really be worried about that. Then we got Cultivate. Cultivate says you add, or it's a 3-drop, and you search your library for 2 basic lands, put them onto the battlefield, put 1 onto the battlefield tapped, and then the other 1 into your hand. So that's really good for early game ramp. Next up, we got Regrowth. Regrowth basically adds a card from your graveyard to your hand. It's 2-drop. It's a sorcery. At least I'm pretty sure. It might be an instant, but that's just my brain being slow. Next up, we got Ponder. Ponder is a 1-drop, and it says look at the top 3 cards of your library, then put it back in any order. You may shuffle your library, and then draw a card. It's good for filtering out the top of your library, or if you don't like the top 3 cards of your library, you can just shuffle your deck back in. Wheel of Misfortune. It's a 3-drop, 1 red, 2 colorless. And this is a little confusing, so follow with me. It says each player secretly chooses a number 0 or greater. Then all player reveals those numbers simultaneously and determine the highest and lowest numbers revealed this way. Wheel of Misfortune deals damage equal to the highest number to each player who chose that number. Each player who didn't choose the lowest number discards their hand and then draws 7 cards. So, if you choose the highest number, take damage and you wheel. If you choose the lowest number, you don't do anything. And then if you're in the middle, you just wheel. Now, if everybody's tied for the highest number, they all take damage and they wheel. If everybody's tied with the lowest number, they do nothing. But you can't really tie like in the middle. Next up is the creatures. There's not a lot of creatures in this deck because it's not really a creature heavy deck considering, you know, my commander. But we're going to start with the ramp, or like the, you know, the mana rock, like mana dorks. So all of these are 1-drops except for Sylvan Caryatid, which is a 2-drop, but they all do the same thing. These 2 elves add 1 green. These add 1 mana being color. This is a flyer. And then the Sylvan Caryatid is a defender, which means it can't attack. It can only block. Next up, we have Ghalta, which is a 12/12 that costs less with the amount of power that you have on the battlefield, and it has Trample. Trample means whatever excess damage rolls over your opponent's creatures gets dealt damage to the actual player. Now we got Brazen Borrower. This is the adventure card. So the adventure side is Petty Theft. Petty Theft is a 2-drop instant adventure. Return target non-land permanent opponent controls to its owner's hand. So if you want to easily remove something without destroying it, you just, boom, go back to your hand. And then you may cast actual Brazen Borrower for its cost later on. As Flash Flying, Brazen Borrower can only block creatures with flyers. With flying, is a 3/1. That's why it's in my deck, because it's really good. Next up, we got Dualcaster Mage. As Flash, Dualcaster Mage enters battlefield, copy a target insert sorcery spell. You may choose new targets for the copy. This is good if I have cards that, copy spells. So, like, if I have a copy spell, I can just copy Dualcaster Mage, make infinite Dualcaster Mages, all that jazz. Next up, we got Ashaya, Soul of the Wild. It is 5-drop, 2 green, 3 colorless. It is a legendary creature elemental, and it says it is power and toughness are equal to the number of lands you control. And the reason why this is good is because it also makes all your non-token creatures forest lands in addition to their other types. So if you have a bunch of non-token creatures, they're all forest, which boosts Ashaya's power. Next up is Maelstrom Wanderer. Is an 8-drop, but for good reason. It gives all your creatures haste. It is a 7/5, and then it has Cascade twice. Cascade says, when you cast a spell, exile cards from the top of your library until you exile a non-land card that costs less. You may cast it without paying its mana cost. Put the exiled cards on the bottom of your library in a random order, then do it again. So before this hits the battlefield, you cast the spells that you cascade from it first. Next up, we got Sea of Wormuse. It's kind of like Wilderness Reclamation, but it's on everybody's untap step instead. So it's much, much better. Next up, we got Coma. It is a 7-drop, 3 colorless, 2 green, 2 blue. It cannot be countered. It is a 6/6. And it says, at the beginning of each upkeep, I create a 3/3 blue sovereign creature token named Coma's Coil. And what I do with those is I sacrifice them to choose one of Coma's effects. The first one is tap target permanent. Its activated abilities can't be activated this turn. And the other one is Coma gains indestructible, which means it can't be destroyed by any means. So the only way to get rid of it is to exile it. Sorry, I'm very tired. Next up is Vorinclex Monstrous Raider. It's in Phyrexian, which is a language from the Magic universe. So if I get this wrong, like some of the words wrong, then that's fine. It's a 6-drop, 2 green, 4 colorless. It has Trample and Haste. It is a 6/6. But the reason why it is really good and the reason why it is in my deck is because you double the amount of counters that are put on permanents you control. So this includes Planeswalkers, which I will get to right after this to make it easier, and also Hel's Paco, whenever it adds counters from its whenever it's added from it attacking. But even better, it halves the amount of counters that are put on your opponent's permanents, rounded down. So if there's 3 counters being put on one of your opponent's permanents, nope, only 1. And now we are getting into Planeswalkers, the reason why Vorinclex is so good. So first one is Ugin the Spirit Dragon. It starts off with 7 loyalty, which means it puts 7 loyalty counters on it. And with Vorinclex, it enters with 14, which means you can automatically ult it. And ulting it is you use its, big ability. So Ugin's +2 is it deals 3 damage to any target. Its second ability is -X, and it says exile each target for each permanent with converted mana cost X or less that isn't one or more colors. And then it's -10. One of my favorites is you gain 7 life, draw 7 cards, then put up to 7 permanent cards from your hand onto the battlefield. So it gives you an immense advantage. Next up we got Teferi, Master of Time. It starts off with 3 loyalty, so then with Vorinclex it gets doubled to 6. And then it says you may activate loyalty abilities of Teferi on any player's turn anytime you can cast an instant. So his +1 is you draw a card, discard a card. His -3 is target creature you don't control phases out. So it phasing out basically means it doesn't exist, but it's not really getting destroyed. It's just, getting poofed from existence. And then it's -10, take 2 extra turns after this one. It's kind of self-explanatory of what extra turns are. It just gives you more of an advantage. And then we got Royal Scions. The reason why this is in here is because it gives Paco Trample from one of its +1s. And then its other +1 is draw a card, discard a card. And its -8 is draw 4 cards. And whenever I do, it deals damage equal to any target, equal to the number of cards in your hand. So if you got 20 cards, boom, 20 damage to any target. Next up, we got counter spells. They all pretty much do the same thing, but they all do different effects. So, counter spell, counter target spell, which means the spell doesn't happen. Ionize, counters spell, but it also deals 2 damage to that spell's controller. Swan Song, it counters specifically enchantments, instants, or sorceries, and its controller puts a 2/2 bird. So, I'm not going to make the other person feel as bad. Delay, you counter target spell, and then you put 3 time counters on it. Whenever at the beginning of each of your upkeeps, you remove a time counter, and then once the last one is removed, that spell gets cast again. And then we got Pact of Negation. This one's pretty funny. You counter target spell, and at the beginning of your next upkeep, if you don't pay 5, you lose the game. And haha, you lost the game. I can hear the comment section rumbling. Next up, we got Deflecting Swat. So if I control my commander, I don't have to pay its mana cost, which is 2 in a red. And then it basically chooses new targets for target spell or ability. So if someone counters my spell, nope, I countered that counter. Double Major. Copy target creature spell you control, except it isn't legendary if the spell is legendary. Brainstorm. 1 blue. Draw 3 cards, then put 2 cards from your hand on top of your library in any order, just filtering out stuff. And then Growth Spiral. Draw a card, then put a land from your hand onto a battlefield. Next up, we got Factor Fiction. It's 3 in a blue. It's an instant. Reveal top 5 cards of your library. An opponent separates those cards into 2 piles. Put 1 pile into your hand and the other into your graveyard. So this can easily put your opponents into a bind because no matter what, normally it just puts you in a specific advantage. Next up, we got Valakut Awakening. This is a flip card. It flips into a land, but I don't normally use the land side. And it says, put any number of cards from your hand on the bottom of your library, then draw that many cards +1. So in my opinion, it's a better wheel, but some people will completely disagree with me. Next up, you got Crop Rotation. An additional cost to cast a spell, you sacrifice the land, and then you search your library for any land card in your deck and put it onto the battlefield. Next up, you got Pongify. Destroy target creature, it can't be regenerated. Its control makes it 3/3. Harrow has an additional cost to cast it, sacrifice the land, and then you search your library for 2 basic land cards and put them onto the battlefield. then shuffle. That voice crack. Next up we got Crozen Grip. Destroy target artifact or enchantment. And then it has split second, which means it can't be interacted with at all. Next up we got Narcissus Reversal. Copy target instant or sorcery spell to return it to its owner's hand. You may choose new targets for the copy. We got Opt, which is a 1-drop blue. You scry one and then you draw a card. Scrying is you look at the top card of your library. If you don't like it, you can put it on the bottom. Otherwise, it stays on top. And then now we got the signed cards. So I'm gonna put them. Not in any particular order. It's not. I like all my signatures, but some of them are from my friends, some of them from actual actors, artists. So first we got one signed by my friend, Mana Drain. Counter target spell, add a colorless for each, for equal to that spell's converted mana cost on your next upkeep. So if you counter a 7-drop spell, you add 7 colorless mana. The reason why it's so special to me is because I think John helped me learn, how to use counter spells, all that jazz. I may be misremembering, but I have it signed by him. So next up we got Omniscience, also signed by John. It is 10-drop spell, but the reason why it is because it says you may cast spells from your hand without paying their mana cost. Don't really need to explain why that's good. It's just really, really good. Then we got Veil of Summer. It's a 1-drop instant. Draw a card if opponent has cast a blue or black spell this turn, and then spells that I control cannot be countered this turn. And it also says you and permanents you control gain hexproof from blue and from black until end of turn. So it is a really good card. Lots of good effects. Yada yada yada. It is signed by my friend Morgan. He currently owns a card shop now. I won't say. Actually, I will say the name. It's called Flashback Gaming. So if y'all look it up, just look it up and give him, go support him. He deserves it. Next up we got Solemn Simulacrum. And the reason why this is funny is because it's an $80 card, and I got it signed by the voice actor of Sokka from Avatar: The Last Airbender. And the reason why this is funny is because he didn't know the value of the card until I said it to him. I told him that it was an $80 card, and he was like, "Oh, what?" And I was like, "Yep." And yeah, I think I just kind of bamboozled him. And next up, we have one of my favorite cards because one of my dear friends bought it for me. Ulamog, the Infinite Gyre. And then another reason why it's so special to me is because it's signed by the voice actor of Beerus. This card is really good because whenever you cast a spell, destroy target permanent, it has Indestructible, and it also has Annihilator 4, which means whenever you swing with it, defending player has to sacrifice 4 permanents. And then whenever this is put in the graveyard from anywhere, you shuffle your graveyard into your library. And it's a 10-10. Can't go wrong with a 10-10. Now we're moving on to some of my favorite cards. My most favorite cards from this deck, apart from the actual commanders. So first we got Jessica's Will. It is a 3-drop, 2 in a red. And the reason why I like this card so much is because it has a lot of value if you have one of your commanders out, which you'll almost always have your commander out in a commander game. It says, if you control your commander, choose both. If not, choose one. Its first mode is add a red for each card in target opponent's hand, and then its other mode is exile the top 3 cards of your library. You may play them this turn. Next up, we got Tempt with Discovery. This is a little hard to explain, but it has Tempting Offer. Search your library for a land card, put it onto the battlefield. Each opponent may do the same. For each opponent that does, I also search for an additional land. So if I have 4 opponents and they all search for a land, I search 5 lands myself. Next up, we got Tasha's Hideous Laughter. And that may sound familiar because it's from a D&D set. What it does is a sorcery, and it says each opponent exiles cards from the top of their library until that player has exiled cards with total mana value 20 or more. So it'll create chaos. Next up is Body of Research. It is a 6-drop, 3 green, 3 blue. And the reason why it's so mana specific is because it creates a 0/0 green and blue fractal creature token. Put X/1/1 counters on it, where X is the number of cards in your library. 1/1 counters. My deck is primarily based around 1/1 counters. Pretty self-explanatory. And if I have like 76 cards in my deck and I have the like Vorinclex out, boom, that's like 140. That's like 140 cards in my deck, or for that creature. Next up is Etali Primal Conqueror. It's a legendary creature, Elder Dinosaur. Trample. It says whenever it enters the battlefield, each player exiles cards from the top of their library until they exile a non-land card. I may cast any number of spells from among the non-land cards exiled this way without paying their mana cost. So, free spells from any deck, any color, doesn't matter. And I may pay 9 and a green Phyrexian mana. Phyrexian mana is you may pay 2 life or the colored mana, and I transform Etali. So it is a base 7/7 on its front side. On the back side is an 11/11. On the back side is a trample indestructible creature, and it says whenever it deals combat damage to a player, they get that many poison counters. And once they hit 10 poison counters, they lose the game. Next up, we got a signed card, and it is also one of my favorite cards in the deck, called Chaos Ward. It's a 3-drop, and it says shuffle a target permanent into its owner's library, and then they reveal cards from the top of their library until they reveal the top card of their library. If it is a permanent card, they put it onto the battlefield. If not, it stays on top. And it is an instant, so you can do it at any time. I'm pretty sure it's signed by the voice actor for Master Roshi, but I'm blanking it now. But I'm pretty sure it's signed by the voice actor for Master Roshi, which you can see why it has dragons on it. So our final 5 cards are going to be combo pieces in this deck. There are other combos that I, like vague combos in this deck that I have, but these are the 2 main ones. And we're going to start with the more complex one. So let's start off with the combo first. Peregrine Drake says whenever it enters battlefield, untap 5 lands. And then it has flying. But that doesn't really matter. It's a 5-drop. 2/3. But that also doesn't matter. The reason why it matters is because it pairs with Deadeye. So Deadeye is a 6-drop 5/5 with Soulbound or Soul Bond. And it says you may pair this creature with another unpaired creature when either enters the battlefield. They remain paired for as long as you control both of them. So that means you play Peregrine Drake, untap 5 lands, then you play Deadeye. Deadeye pairs with Peregrine Drake. And it says as long as Deadeye is paired with another creature, each of those creatures have a blue and a colorless. Exile this creature, then return to the battlefield underneath your control. So what you do is you pair it with Peregrine Drake, and then you keep flickering Peregrine Drake over and over and over, making infinite mana. And then another funny creature that I have in my deck is called Tanazir Quandrix. Tanazir Quandrix says whenever it enters the battlefield, double the number 1/1 counters on target creature you control. And then the other effect really doesn't matter, but it makes it whenever it attacks and another creature attacks, that other creature has base power and toughness 4/4. But the reason why it's good with this combo is because you keep flickering it with Paco out, and you make Paco infinitely big. And then we have the final combo of the deck, which is one of my favorite combos in the whole entire game. So we have Toralf, God of Fury. Toralf has Trample as 5/4 4-drop. And it says, whenever a creature or planeswalker an opponent controls is dealt excess non-combat damage, Toralf deals damage equal to the excess to any target other than that permanent. The reason why it is funny is because of Blasphemous Act. So Blasphemous Act is a pretty hefty 9-drop, but it says it costs 1 less for each creature onto the battlefield. The reason why it's good with Toralf is because it deals 13 damage to each creature. So if there's a bunch of 1/1s, that's 12 damage from each creature to any target. And I have beamed people out of the game so many times with that fucking specific combo. But anyways, yeah, that is my favorite deck of Magic the Gathering. I don't think it's going to change anytime soon. I don't think it's going to change at all. I do plan on pimping this deck out. We'll see what the top. Let's see what the most expensive cards in this deck are. So the most expensive card in the deck is Gemstone Caverns at a whopping $474. Next up we got Taiga, which is $261, Mana Crypt, which is $212, Jeweled Lotus, $97, Underworld Breach, $76, Solemn Simulacrum, $64, Ulamog, $49, Mana Drain, $48, the Ozolith, $40. And the deck totals out in a whopping $2,200 or $2,500 if you count the $100 artist proofs that I got, which I do because it's my deck. I can do what I want. But anyways, if you like this video, I know it was a bit of a longer video, and I know it's not everybody's cup of tea to listen to me ramble about Magic the Gathering. But I know somebody wanted to see my favorite deck. Let me see if I can find your name. I'll shout you out. Let me find your name real quick. Cards in hand 0. You asked me to, or you said it would be cool to see more videos about Magic from you, maybe showing off your favorite decks or cards. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you all enjoyed this video, and I will see y'all in the next video. See ya.